Hello everyone, thank you for watching. My name is Julius Klatte. I'm an architect at Ruiter Architects and I'll be presenting how to make a portfolio today. I have two colleagues in this presentation, Annemiek Bleumink and Jolien Bruin, and they will also be part of this talk. So, introductions first. Architecture is a source of energy. That's our office statement. It means that from the beginning, since 1994, we've been occupied with making sustainable architecture, and that drives us as a group of architects, and it drives our architecture in a sense. It means that we are a people-centered design approach, and from that center, we emphasize energy, materials, and ecology as part of what it means to make a healthy building environment. We started out on an attic in 1994, and now we are a group of 36 people. We sort of hover around 30 to 40 people in the past couple of years, and then been doing quite well. And it's a very horizontal organization. So we have a lot of architects, and we all work on projects pretty much self-sufficiently and in small teams. The office where we are today is a renovated steel workshop. So it used to be a place where welding was going on, and when this office was renovated, we put in an extra floor, very lightweight, and a heat pump came in, and we made a big atrium in the center of the building, which makes it a really nice place with lots of daylight, great place to work. And when you're interested in our work, I invite you to look at the website and see what kind of buildings we do. So our emphasis is on sustainability, but also on what it means for people to use a building. So making connection with each other, but also making connection with the environments is very important. So over to the subject of today. I told something about our office and myself. So what you're going to do with a portfolio is also tell something about yourself. So a usual job applicant would have a letter and a CV. And us, as a creative professionals, we also make a portfolio. So the letter actually explains why you're applying to a certain office and whether you're a good match. Of course, you think so. The CV is more like a list of skills and experience you have in the past. And the portfolio is really what you've got to show for it. So it can really show something about your creative process. The letter is about the connection you're making with the office, and it's personalized for the receiver. So every letter you write is very different based on the connection you're making between your personal profile and the profile of the office where you're applying. And the CV and the portfolio, on the other hand, are very personal. In my opinion, they're the best when they really reflect a sense of personality and also the specific skills that you want to develop or that you want to focus on. So what's the difference between a CV and a portfolio? Well, basically the CV is just a factual list, and it's more or less what other people say about you. So the quality assessment relies mainly on the proof by others for a degree or reference to a past employer, and it's quite descriptive. The portfolio, on the other hand, is a very personal document. You're free to build it in any way you like. And the focus is, of course, on the creative skills you have. It can be very persuasive and it can be very selective. So it's not about completeness, it's about how you want to present yourself. Well, in practical sense, the CV and the portfolio can be combined in one PDF, and it's very practical within the office, because when you share the portfolio with other people, then you have all the contact information and everything together. So, how are you going to develop a portfolio? I would want to say we start with why. And the why you develop into a how, and the how you develop into a what. So what does it mean for a portfolio? It means you start with you. You have a certain set of skills, you have a certain character, you have a certain interests. over the years, you've developed a set of skills that you want to showcase, and you use the projects to showcase that. So it's about the value of you, and the skills and projects are secondary to that. The projects sort of point back to the skills you have, because they show what kind of design skills or analytical skills you have. And the skill sets you present point to what kind of a vision you have of how you will be of value to an office. So it's not a catalog of projects. It's not about showing each project and each separate quality of each project. You can make a selection, 3 to 4 is fine, and even 1 or 2 could be interesting if that's really the highlight of your work. It's not about quantity. And the same actually goes for skills. Of course, you can demonstrate the width of your skills, like hand drawing and 3D modeling and everything. But basically, depth is also more interesting. So if you have specific skills that you're really good at, or you think you want to develop further, then that would be something to highlight. So it's not about showing that you can do everything. And basically, the main thing to keep in mind is that it's a personal narrative. So, of course, you have made these projects and you have a certain set of skills, but you can frame and highlight whatever you like in this portfolio to put the emphasis on what you think is important to know about you. Hi, Jolien. Welcome. Good to have you here. We're colleagues, both architects here at Ruiter Architects, and you'll be helping students with their portfolio later on in the BAU event. In your experience, what is the importance of a portfolio when you apply for a job?
I think that the portfolio is the first chance you get to really show your skills and your projects, and I think that it's a really good way to showcase what you're capable of, and also to show what you've done so far. But the strong point of this is that you really make a selection of the best things that you've done, and that's the way for a future employee to see what you're capable of.
Yeah. So basically, there's 2 moments when you use the portfolio. At first, to make yourselves known to an employer, and then secondly, at the job interview, you bring it along. In this presentation, I put the emphasis on the portfolio as a personal document. Do you think it can also be different? Can you tailor it to a specific employer?
Yes, I've always done that. I've generally made a selection of projects, like maybe 8 or 10 projects that I've had in the past. And every time I send out a portfolio, I pick the top 3 or 4 that are relevant to either the office or the job. And then when I go to the interview, I take the full package, not with the intention to show everything. So you need to be very clear of which ones that you've sent to the office before. But sometimes something during the interview comes up and you're like, well, actually, and then you can show something else. And I've noticed that works well. And I also tend to use quite large portfolios when I go on an interview. And not in terms of a lot of pages, but in terms of size, because people like to look at bigger booklets, and not an A4 booklet, but an A3 booklet. And I think that's really, I've had good feedback on that in the past.
So typically when you have a big A3 portfolio with you, what else do you bring then to this job interview?
Well, a portfolio is a selection of some projects and only some images. You only show the very strong parts of that project, but a project is much more than just those images. It is an entire process. It is drawing packages. And one of the things that an employer looks for when they're hiring people is, what can you deliver? Not just who you are and what your skills are, but can you actually make a drawing package? So I have, in the past, always brought a full package of all the project drawings from at least the last project that I've been working on, sometimes an extra project. And there have been interviews where I haven't used it at all, but it's also given me the opportunity to, if something comes up during the interview, about something unrelated, and you can say, well, actually, I worked on that, and you can show exactly how you worked on that. So it also really helps to keep your portfolio concise, because you know you already have all the other drawings. So if you want to show something extra, you can just put that in that extra booklet.
Yeah, so you can spark interest with the portfolio,
Yes.
and then in an interview, you can go in depth with the other booklet.
Yes, I've even had an interview once where it was a second interview at the same office with one of their senior directors, and he was a technical director, and he didn't even look at my portfolio. He was like, "Oh, you brought drawings," and he just wanted to see the drawings. So yeah, it was very useful.
Yeah, I guess project documentation means that you have a broader view of everything you're capable of than just the selection.
Exactly.
Interesting perspective.
Yes.
Thank you. Then, of course, there's the question of how actually am I going to put that material that I have in mind into a certain format? And then we're talking about visual communication. So I have selected 3 examples of websites of architecture firms to show what kind of emphasis they put on their work. So the first example is David Chipperfield Architects. And when you open their website, there's a grid of photos that shows the project. And I think you can say that simplicity and sort of clean visual information is what is apparent here. Also, when you click through to projects, you see that there's pictures there without any people. So the focus is on the material quality, the light, the detailing, the proportion. It's really about the architecture as a sort of object of art. Also, if you look at the way they present, for example, a staff list, the emphasis is on a sense of order, a sense of hierarchy, and a lot of precision is implicit in the way of things are presented. Then if you move to an office like BIG, Bjarke Ingels, there's a very different approach. So the project list is more like a database that can be sorted in several ways. Every project is a color-coded icon, and it really evokes a sense of the digital age, and there's a focus on every unique quality of a project. The emphasis is always on the whole project, so there's a lot about the context, the siting and the program, and projects are also explained in the sense that they're a certain reaction to the context. So like a logical intervention, a manipulation of the context. Then third, if you look at our own website, what is apparent there is that we put planet and process first, and then start talking about the projects. You see a lot of images of the projects which are actually interiors, which connects to the idea that we develop a project from the inside outwards. Another thing that you see when you click through to projects is that there's a focus on the performance. For us, sustainability is a very important theme. So the sustainability performance, like energy or ecology, is highlighted in each project. And there's a mix of text and diagrams to explain this performance narrative. Another thing that is apparent in our approach is that we put values and design principles as a first. So the objects we make is really a result of a certain process that we follow, rather than that the architectural object is emphasized. So 3 different approaches for firms. So how would that relate to a personal profile? Well, here's some people I invented. So we have Alice, who's maybe the philosopher, introverted thinker. She would like it to work in a small studio where she can really go in depth on projects. She likes technical challenges. And so maybe when she makes a portfolio, her emphasis would be on the meaning of a certain project in themes related to society, and maybe she goes in depth on certain technical aspects of working with monuments, because that's her interest and her focus. Then Bart is a guy who wants to work in an international firm and maybe on high-rise, So he likes big, complex projects. So maybe he could use diagrams like big to emphasize his approach on projects. He can showcase his skills at 3D rendering and maybe also make the business case for a certain project apparent, which is his sort of business take on a project. And thirdly, we have Caroline, who's interested in working on interiors. She's concerned about climate change, which also makes it interesting for her to think about the material usage. And she would really like to gain broad experience before starting her own firm, which means that she wants to orientate herself broadly and maybe adapt her portfolio to certain offices depending on who would like to work with her. So if we look at the you you're presenting, I would say self-knowledge is the starting point. So if you think about yourself, there's things about personality, but also the way you work and your motivation, what are your goals. Keep those in mind when you make a portfolio, because the portfolio can sort of point in that direction. Then the skills the skill set you have is more than just your design skills. So you can use the portfolio to communicate something about how you approach the design, but you can also tell about how you work in a team, or what kind of writing you did on your history thesis, or what else is your knowledge? Are you good at carpentry, or did you make your own tree hut? Whether that's important or not to the job you're applying for is up to you, but it can definitely tell something about you. And then thirdly, you have the projects, and you can use the material from the projects to highlight skills and your values. So you point back to your skills and values. Then there's 3 aspects of a good portfolio that I want to go into, and that's clarity, focus, and depth. Clarity of thought, clarity in the way you present things, focus in the project selection, so you don't have like a complete list of projects. That's not it's not good for reading a portfolio, and it also sort of distracts from the message that you want to convey with the portfolio. So you'll really focus in the number of projects, and you focus on the relevant projects that you want to highlight. And that allows you to go into more depth about what's important to you, and also in depth about the design solutions you developed in a certain project. So if you go into clarity, there's some do's and don'ts. So basically, for example, the graphic layout, it's better to keep it simple. You don't really want to distract from the contents. So a lot of white space and just graphic elements to maintain a sort of visual coherence are definitely a do. And mixing things up or making every page different is definitely a don't. The graphic layout is helping to point out what's important. So it's not a design in itself. It's really serving your message. Practically, it's a good idea to check whether the type size you used and the drawings you include in your portfolio are legible, both in print and on the screen. For example, if you have to zoom into a portfolio to read things, then it makes it quite hard to sort of have a quick overview. And I would definitely recommend to talk to people about your portfolio and see what they see. Because if you use their eyes to look at your portfolio, you might get a different message back from the message you think you're conveying. Then if we go into focus, it's definitely a good idea to focus on your audience, to understand that your portfolio will be seen pretty shortly. And in those few moments, you have to stand out from other applicants. So in-depth reading is not really useful for a portfolio. I said it before, so limiting the number of projects is definitely a good idea. It's not about completeness. That's could be your CV, or you could include a list of projects in the back of your portfolio if you think it's important to show the breadth of your experience. But definitely putting effort into reducing the contents is a good idea. And when you talk about, for example, internships that you did, it's a very good idea to highlight your contribution So what we see sometimes is people applying and they worked at a certain office and they include artist impressions of the project that they work on and nothing else. And then it's pretty clear for the receiver that the artist impressions were usually not made by the intern. So it doesn't really tell anything about the contribution that was made. So think about what you did and tell a story about that. That's more valuable than showing the end result of the production of a whole office. Then depth, that's the hardest part. Basically, when you show your projects, you want to sort of demonstrate your skills in a way. So that could be analytical skills, it could be design skills. And I think a method to do that is to show a problem and show your solution to it. You don't have to fit every decision into the story, but if you highlight the most important ones for a project, that can really be a lens to look at what you did for a certain project. Also, the development of how you maybe started out with the project and how you ended up can be an interesting narrative to tell. Of course, if you also use different skills to get to the end results, sketching at first, modeling later, physical modeling, whatever you use to get to the end results, it's nice to show the design development. Yeah, and basically, if there's anything other that's important, just from apart from the student projects you did, definitely show it if it's relevant, because it tells something about yourself. So if we look at the depth, focus, and clarity, you could say there's a pyramid there. You need clarity to go into focus. And once you focus, there's an opportunity to go in depth on a project. So depth requires focus, focus requires clarity. So start out with clarity. Here's an example from some portfolios we helped out with last year. So here's an example of a portfolio sheet that was changed later on, and our main feedback here was there's too much information on one page. So it's not really clear what the emphasis should be on this project, or what's the story to tell. There's just too much information. Another take that we see sometimes is that people tend to document their projects rather than tell a story about them. So it could be nice if you see plans and sections and elevations, but maybe you don't really have to document the whole project to tell your story. Another thing that we sometimes see is that there's an emphasis on approach. And I think personally that's a very interesting take, because what I said before about your design intent and how you develop an answer to a certain question can be really shown this way. So for example, in this case, it's about the flexibility of an apartment, how it can change over time or for different users. And it is highlighted in a plan and in smaller plans and in perspective, all in one page. So to summarize, the typical portfolio contents would be a cover sheet, basically to tell who's the portfolio from and not much else. You could start with an introduction, and that would be the start of your narrative about you. Including contact information is always a good idea, because if your portfolio is sent around, but the contact information is not included, it can be a bit of a hassle. If you use a table of contents, that would be another opportunity for framing the relevance of projects. For example, rather than using their names or the semesters that you selected the projects from, you could tell about whether it's an urban design project or a technical design. So you can highlight what is special about a certain project. And then, the project section, it really depends on your personal selection. I would always start with the best project that you want to highlight, because that's your first impression. And you want to include your finest project. Any special interests you can add at the back, because it sort of highlights what makes you special. But it's maybe not the most important information to start out with. And then some final tips. Always make a PDF. Nothing else. When you send an email, and emails are usually preferred, attach the PDF to your email and don't link to any websites. Of course, you want to make sure that the receiver actually gets the file in their inbox, so optimizing the file size is a good idea. But then do check for screen appearance. So you don't want a pixeled image, and you also don't want a PDF that loads very slowly because of heavy vector drawings. So there's a balance there. Check how it appears on the screen. And then also check what it's like in print, because in an interview you would typically bring your portfolio along. You can consider the difference between a portfolio that is received by email on a usually horizontal screen and in print. So for example, if you bring an A3 size portfolio, that would probably also fit nicely on the screen and would also provide lots of space for leafing through during an interview. Legibility is again important, so type size, but also the size of images. As Jolien highlighted, consider bringing separate project booklets to go in depth. It might also help you make the portfolio more concise, having the knowledge that you're also bringing along the full project documentation. Yeah, and the final tip is be confident about who you are and what you've got for the employer. So knowing yourself is half of the task of finding a match in a firm. You can phone if you have specific questions and you want feedback on the selection procedure. And definitely whenever you're turned down, try to learn from that. Good to have you here. I introduced you at the beginning of the presentation as the Managing Director for Paul de Ruiter Architects. Can you describe what happens to a portfolio when somebody decides to apply at the office?
Well, most portfolios we received by email. That's also something I really appreciate, because then I can see it really quick. I can send it to somebody else. On paper, it's also really personal, but it doesn't make it easier to share it with other people. So by email, it's I think the first easiest way to show it to me. Then I always check the letter. Is it complete? What are you applying for? Do you describe yourself really well? And what do you want from the office? I'm not looking for a copy of our website. I'm always looking for something special. What makes you special for the office? And also, what do you want to learn from the office? And why do you want to work at our office? And then for me, it's always the best to have the email in a PDF. Because in a zip, for example, it's not easy to open it. Sometimes I have to make more changes. So in a PDF, that would be the best. It should be high res. So low res is always, it's not good.
So, and based on the letter and the CV and the portfolio, a decision is made whether to invite somebody or not. Can you explain what happens to a portfolio or an application when there is no vacancy at the moment?
Well, when it's a good one, we always invite somebody, because when you have a really good designer or an architect, then I think it's always important to speak to somebody. Also, when there's no position available in the office, sometimes you make in a position, because if somebody is really special, you want that person in the office. If not, then we always put it in our archive and call somebody later. Or maybe sometimes I will call them first and say, well, we do not have a position yet, but I will let you know in, for example, 2 or 3 months. And then we call again, and then we try to find a way to have somebody in the office.
Do you appreciate it when applicants phone after a week or after 2 weeks?
No, I think we get a lot of emails. We always check everybody. But because we have so many people who do apply in the office, it takes a lot of time, and I cannot always explain why I choose somebody to the office or not.
Yeah. And at the job interview, the applicants usually bring their portfolio. What kind of role does the portfolio play in this conversation?
An important role, because you can see how somebody develops during the year, but also do you can you work in a team? Do you play in a sport in a team? Is there a gap in your portfolio, for example, and why is there a gap? So for us, it's really important to see what you did the last couple of years, also what you do besides your study. And why you made the choices you made during your life, during your study. So yeah, it's a really important a piece of paper.
My colleagues Annemieke and Jolien will be helping out on the 9th of March by giving feedback on portfolios. I'm really looking forward to that. I would recommend, if you're interested in our office, to look at the website if there's any job openings, but we're also always on the lookout for interns. And you're welcome to give feedback to this presentation. Thank you for your attention.